Greetings. How are you all? Welcome back. We have been doing these sessions, webinars to engage our students in the MA International Relations Security and Strategy program being offered jointly with Coursera. And it's my distinct privilege today to be hosting a very um, power-packed panel, so to say. My own colleagues at Jindal School of International Affairs, all of whom have had significant experience as serving diplomats. We call them practitioner scholars or scholar practitioners, which makes them a very unique category in themselves because unlike me, who's been academic throughout my life, these ladies and gentlemen have significant experience of representing their countries on the world stage and in the conduct of international relations. So I would like them to talk today about their experiences as diplomats and why they have moved to teaching from diplomacy, and how is the conduct of diplomacy and conduct of practical international relations different from the what we learn in the classroom as international relations. By the way, those of you who are not familiar with this little semantic, international relations is often used with no caps, small I and small r, to denote the practice of foreign relations. And international relations with a capital I and a capital R are used to represent the study and the field and the knowledge of international studies, which we do in the classroom and in degree programs like the IRSS. So without further ado, I want to engage with our scholar practitioners for you to get a sense of from them. And they're coming from different countries, not just India, but from around the world. So let me briefly introduce them to you. It's my privilege to have Professor Kim Emmanuel. She's from St. Lucia, one of the small island nations of the Caribbean. And she has been working for the government of St. Lucia in the foreign service, represented in the UK, and she has handled many different regions. And she's now, of course, also teaching with us as a full-time faculty member. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
I have with me Professor Karin Kostavasquez. Karin is a Brazilian, former Brazilian diplomat. She has represented her country in the foreign ministry and also worked for the British mission in Brazil, and is currently with the United Nations as an advisor on South-South cooperation. And also our one of my colleagues at Jindal School of International Affairs, who runs our Latin America, Caribbean, and Africa program. So welcome, Karin. Such a pleasure to have you here. I also have, let me also move to Professor Abdul Fattah Mura, ambassador. He was ambassador of Syria to Cyprus and Jordan. And he has also served in India before becoming a professor. And Professor Amura also was a deputy foreign minister of Syria in the past, and he heads our Center for Middle East Studies. Welcome, Ambassador Professor Amura.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome for this family of diplomats and ambassadors. And I believe we can form JSIA diplomatic community or corps.
We already had a club.
Yeah,
we have a diplomatic club here, right here. And our students, right, we want them to be part of this and to learn from all of you. Let me also introduce Professor Hasib Mohammed. Hasib was acting High Commissioner of Trinidad and Tobago, another smaller country from the Caribbean, to India before joining us. And he has also served in the UK. And Professor Hasib Mohammed, he teaches international law, and he's also one of our important colleagues. So welcome, Hasib.
Thank you, Dr. Cholia.
Thank you so much. Now, last but not least, let me introduce my two Indian colleagues. Ambassador Mohan Kumar. He was India's ambassador to France, and he's also the program head for the online MA IRSS. And he was also previously posted in Bahrain and was a career diplomat for more than 3 decades. So he's actually teaching the core course on diplomacy in the MA IRSS program. So for those of you who want to know your teachers, you've met some of them before, but Ambassador Mohan Kumar is teaching the first semester. So he will be one of our key lead persons as an instructor going forward. Mohan, great to have you here.
Thank you, Sriram. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And it's also my privilege to introduce to you Ambassador Ravi Thapar, another very distinguished retired Indian diplomat who was also put in over 3 decades of service. He last retired as ambassador, India's ambassador to Panama, and has served with distinction in many parts of the world. He is also a specialist on international law and legal issues, and is currently teaching a course on economic diplomacy to our students here. So welcome, Ambassador Thapar. So good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Chowle.
Wonderful. So now that the rounds are done, I'd like to start with the ladies always first, and ask them what is it that they have learned from their experience as serving diplomats, and how what kind of impact it has had on them as teachers. Because as I said before, they're very different from people like me who have been largely in academia. And of course, I've also worked in international peacekeeping missions in Sri Lanka and the Philippines before, but they are the ones who have done this. And my colleague, Professor Devika Mishra, is also here, and I'll ask her to also come in now and then, because she's important for the MIRSS program and is herself an international relations theory and Latin Americanist. But let me start with Kim and Karen. Kim, would you like to first share your thoughts on why did you leave the diplomatic service and become a professor? And what is it that you're carrying, the IR, the international relations that you did for St. Lucia, which is a UN member state, and what the IR that you're now teaching to students in the classroom at Jindal? What's the link, or what's the similarity or the difference? Practice and theory, or is it much more?
I think I'll start with, well, I taught before, so it's not new to me. I taught with University of Warwick as well as University of the West Indies. So it wasn't really a leap, but a continuation of a career. And who knows what's gonna happen later. And I think it gives you a chance. Diplomacy, actually lecturing and so on, gives you a chance to further your publishing career if you're interested in that. And so I think that has been an interest of mine. So going into academia at this point, or revisiting academia, was somewhat natural for me because of my background. With regards to the differences, I would say in IR practice, you focus more. There are tangible issues, especially for small states, that you get an inside look at. You get to understand it from an insider perspective rather than an outsider perspective, compared to academics who may have a different view on certain issues. But when you get right into it, you understand certain limitations of states. You understand that states don't always act by themselves, no matter how powerful they are. And there are basic things that you do understand. I think the tangible aspects of IR is very much on the table when you're thinking of even small states interacting with other small states, with interacting with powerful states, what is of interest to certain states, why is it that they pursue certain policies, how is it that they go about pursuing it in practical form. This makes sense to you when you leave international relations in a sense when you practice it. With regards to the academic side, well, I've done international relations throughout on the academic side, and there's a lot to teach us with regard to the new issues they bring forth. Sometimes security issues that is just emerging, you get academics writing on this, and then we also deal with this at the practical level, whether it be for the UN and so on. For example, small states issues like climate change and so on. There's lots of academic works written on this, and we also deal with these issues within a practical context in our countries as well.
Wonderful. Well, that's toward the horizon. You have really opened up the discussion. Let me get to Karen. Karen, you have served for your own government, also for other governments. Now with the UN, and you've been with us for many years, teaching here and also at Fudan University in China. You've been really a global South person, very important for us to promote that. So your thoughts on academia and diplomatic, corridors, which you're very familiar with. What's the difference? What do you bring a certain edge or something unique, having been a diplomat, to the classroom, to students, or do you think you still have to fill up and learn more, because now you have to cite academic sources and all these things which you would probably have not done so much doing only policy? How is the transition, and why did you move from diplomatic service to academia?
First, thank you very much, Hiram and Divika, for inviting me to this panel. And it's such a great pleasure to see all my friends, new and old friends, again in this forum. And as you rightly pointed, Hiram, I hold different caps, and as associate professor at Jindal, as a Fudan scholar here in China, since beginning of this year, back to the United Nations, advising the strategic framework for the next 5 years of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation. And this is all to say that, and this is probably my first big message to the more than almost 80 students that are listening to us here. It's not a trade-off. Yes, you can be in academia, and yes, you can continue to be a practitioner, you can continue to be in diplomacy. And actually, I think the two roles are very much complementary to each other. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive, exactly the opposite. Even before transitioning to academia, when I was with the United Nations and the World Bank, and even with the Foreign Service of Brazil, a lot of my work had to do with strategic planning, thinking, and engagement with think tank communities, scholarly communities. So this is my second big question. I think my second big message to the students. International relations, I think it's more and more beyond government cabinets, and more having to engage. This is a compelling message. We have to engage with different actors in international relations, within government, across the government, so within the ministries of foreign affairs, with the ministries of economy, with the ministries of the line ministries, the ministries of health, education, so on and so forth, for the coordination and formulation of the foreign policies and government positions. But more and more with the private sector, more and more with think tanks, academia, more and more with non-governmental organizations, and the people-to-people exchanges are crucial. So this is my second big message. And I think the way we think and practice international relations, besides what I've already mentioned, I think it goes much beyond traditional Western thinking of security, international relations as countries pursuing their own security or trying to maximize their security. And I think more and more international relations is about the interaction of all these actors, government, non-government organizations, people, to address common challenges. and even more importantly, to build a future that it's more sustainable, that it's more inclusive, that it's more prosperous. And we've been going, the world has been going through such a tremendous, difficult times with the pandemic. And this again comes as a very, very clear message to all of us to show us once and again that we can only address problems, we can only move forward in building a shared future if we collaborate with each other. And this is probably one of the main messages or the main lessons that I've learned after living in China, after living in India, having being born and growing up in Brazil, living and working in the US in more than 15 countries across the globe, is that understandings and perspectives on international relations are much beyond and are much, much richer than what mainstream theories that are usually the ones that we see in the handbooks and in international relations introduction classes teach us, right? So I think it's all this richness, this diversity of visions, of perspectives, and with a positive framework, how we can collaborate to build a better future, because this is win-win. This is what we all want to pursue at the end of the day. And one last message, as Kim and I are the only women in this panel, and I wouldn't be, I could never complete my speech without reinforcing the need to bring gender perspectives into the study and the practice of international relations. Many of our countries still has limited number of diplomats, women diplomats in their corps, or even when they do, not all of them had the same opportunities to grow in their careers or to grow up in the ranks. And of course, also gender issues from a substantive lenses, how foreign policy is impacting women. And so not only in the policy making, but also in the study of policy, foreign policy. Thank you, Shira.
Thank you, Karen. That's again, a very important point, that beyond the textbooks and beyond the mainstream theories lies a whole world of practice and a web of cooperation and cooperative networks that are required actually for the world order to be sustained. And that's what Karen is talking about, because it's not only conflict and competition, but there has to be substantial cooperation. And like she said, beyond the traditional stakeholders of states, our students are going to be learning about a lot of non-state actors in the MA IRSS program and how they impact upon the world that is shaping up. Let me go to my colleague Hasib now. Hasib, you're from Trinidad. You've been acting High Commissioner to India. You have served your country for many years. So your thoughts as a diplomat, and how do you think you're different being a former diplomat now that you're in academia and teaching students, and you're in a university system and offering insights on international law and business and such things? So Hasib.
Thank you, Dr. Chaulia. I didn't have the patience for 3 decades like Ambassador Mohan and Ambassador Tapar, but yes, I do possess diplomatic experience. It was a personal choice to enter the world of academia. I joined the Foreign Service at a young age, at 23, and I had a good experience. I had a fulfilling experience. I worked in the consular division, I worked in the legal division, I worked abroad. So I made a conscious decision to enter academia. And coming to Jindal University, I've learned a lot about myself and about international relations and international law. And having worked my experience in government, I realized how pro-government I am in terms of understanding sovereign decision-making. It's not an easy process. And I know it's probably the norm to criticize governments around the world, but in order to do so, right, you must understand how difficult it is to be a sovereign representative, how difficult it is to make sovereign decisions. And even while teaching the international law course, sometimes the way in which I teach and interact with students, I try to make it as practical as possible, or even give practical situations. So for example, when you had the military coup in Myanmar, right? Yes, there's the argument of human rights and democracy, but I told the students, I say, look, in international law, right, and based upon the Nicaragua case, there's no obligation, right, to have a democratic government unless stated in the constituent instrument of a country. So therefore, you need to understand both sides. That's the point I'm making, right? In addressing international issues and working in international affairs, it's my experience that brought me to that point, right? And even this semester teaching diplomatic and consular law with the situation in Afghanistan, it's created so many questions for those who are interested in Afghanistan, in international relations and in international law. So for example, granting recognition or diplomatic recognition of the Taliban, right? By conferring rights and obligations on the Taliban as the recognized government of, whether they call it the Emirate of Afghanistan or the Republic of Afghanistan. What does that mean for the international community? Will states recognize the Taliban? Will the US grant permission for the Taliban to have a permanent representative mission in New York? All these are serious questions. And yes, we live in a diverse world. We live, international relations, there's always something happening out there. So in terms of my perspective and how I teach and interact with students, I try to make it as practical as possible, right? Whether you use your practical experience or based upon, say, for example, an international legal regime or international jurisprudence. And I try to encourage as much dialogue as can, sustain. So that's my perspective, my teaching experience, and how I engage with students in Jindal School of International Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Asif. Yes, indeed, there are some very pressing international legal challenges as we go forward. Almost all the big global crises, climate change or instability or fragile states like Afghanistan or Myanmar, all of them, the forced migration, you name it. You have maritime issues. Everywhere you find the relevance of international law, and our students are actually going to learn about it in the IRSS. So that's good to know. Let me now request Professor Amura, Ambassador Amura, who is our Vice Dean, to reflect on his long career as a diplomat and what he brings to the classroom and to students, because often students are fascinated by his lectures because he brings in the anecdotes and the interesting examples of his engagement with very, very high political leaders from around the world when he represented his country. And he was actually an interpreter to the former Syrian president Hafiz al-Assad, and I think he has interacted with US presidents as well in that capacity. So Professor Amura, and you teach diplomatic practice also. So what is it that I think, what should young people and students know about the diplomatic world? Hasib just mentioned that, one has to look at the perspective of the state and raison d'etat, the reasons for the state's existence and its actions. But also the state has to engage with other states and with other stakeholders. So your thoughts on this whole phenomenon and how you have handled it as a scholar practitioner?
Well, thank you very much. As a matter of fact, I started my career as an academician before I became a diplomat, and then a diplomat, and then back to be, having this honor to be a member of esteemed, faculty members at JSIA. From what I learned as a matter, or gained and experienced, it's very, very interesting. A diplomat should be an honest man, not only to his own country, but also to the values of humanity. And here lies, the problem of how he adheres to his policy, to his country's policy, and how he can accommodate international law. In theory, academic life is theorizing, which is, you put disciplines, you put norms, values, laws, which are internationally recognized, according to which, the international relations are being conducted. But in a practice, we could meet, a diplomat meets a number. In theory, it is rigid rules, provisions, which are there, which it is supposed that every country, every diplomat should adhere as a guide. This is an ideal. And this is the outcome, as a matter of fact, of great thinkers who have, after a long time of experience and the catastrophes in the world, came up with to manage peace, law, and order, and cooperation in this world, and also the track of how states should behave. But still, interest of the states, it changes, and the world order, political order changes, as a matter of fact. I remember when I was taking this same course at Oxford University, one old British ambassador, an old man, came to us. He gave a lecture, and he said, "My dear boys, a diplomat should not be that rigid to what he believes in. He should be like a British man. In summer and winter, he carries an umbrella because he might see that the next day his country's position, his stances politically changes. So he should be very careful." In a practice for diplomacy, it's another world, which is combined to what is being learned, as I said. But when you go to meet the people, as Karen has said, you meet the culture of the people, the understanding of the people, how to respect the people, how to communicate with the people. Sometimes, and most of the time, diplomats, ambassadors, etc., are put in a very difficult situation. Here lies their eligibility and their capability, how to tackle it with no harm. To negotiate, I was involved, as a matter of fact, as you rightly said, in the peace talks in Washington between the Syrian and the Israelis, and also with high-level, meeting. And I was in charge of Syria-Turkey relations, during the honeymoon. And now the honeymoon has become to a very bad divorce before it is being managed. My 4 books, for example, speak about this possibility of failure of this honeymoon, because there is no matching of the mind or the hearts. There is interest lying behind, which diplomats should analyze. So my engagement, as a matter of fact, even the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership Association, etc., which was a great union for the Mediterranean, Sarkozy's, and this means there is interest, and the diplomats keep that in mind, and they have to know how to maneuver, how to achieve there. For example, I can tell you, when I was representing my country at the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership Association in Barcelona, 45 foreign ministers, I was the only deputy minister representing Syria at that time. At that time, the two-state solution was adopted and accepted in the Arab Summit in 2002 in Beirut. What I'm talking about, 2007, 2008, when we met. The Americans supported, the EU supported, the League of Arab States supported, and all of a sudden, in that meeting, they wanted to delete it. Oh my God, I know my country's policy, but I have to stick to my country's policy. And in the final communique, I was the only one who said no. They wanted to delete this two-state solution, and I openly spoke to Ferrero, the high, Commissioner for Foreign Affairs of the EU, and he said, "You, my dear, didn't you say in your meeting on this day and that the EU supports the two-state solution? You, Amr Musa, also the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, came and he said, Mr. Musa, you are the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, and this is a decision taken by the leaders, the presidents. How can you violate it? Then I said no. They came to threaten me in one way, and Ahmed Abul Ghait was the foreign minister of Egypt at that time. They came, they will say that only Syria said is against this, and then they will make you responsible for this. I said, listen, I don't mind. I can go and talk in a press conference and then say they withdrew their support. It is not a secret that Moratinos, the foreign minister of Spain at that time, spoke to my minister in Damascus, and he said, you have a deputy minister who is very very, adherent. Please talk to him. And the answer was, he is entitled to speak what he has to speak.
Right.
In the end of the, yeah.
So you're giving us the nuances of, diplomatic events and positions and the pressures that are applied at, I'll come back to you, sir. I'll come back to you. But in the interest of time, I'd like to also bring in my Indian colleagues also. Let me ask Ambassador Thapar, Professor Thapar, who has served in many foreign missions and recently retired. He's been a career diplomat, Indian Foreign Service, but also trained as a lawyer and as a legal scholar. And he's teaching economic diplomacy right now to the on-campus students. And we hope there will be an opportunity for him to also teach the online MA-IRSS students in the future. So Ambassador Thapar, you've been listening to all your people of your tribe, and they are bringing wonderful insights about being diplomats and how that influences the way they think about the world. So what has been your experience on this, sir?
Greetings to you, Professor Chaulia. Greetings to Mohan, Ambassador Mohan, my colleague in the External Affairs Ministry. Greetings to all my colleagues from the Diplomatic Corps. It's an honor and a privilege to be in this very prestigious event. It's an honor to be on a panel which is, hosted by Jindal Global, one of the inspirations for me joining the academic world. Since this is targeted at global audiences, let me straight away say that we live in a very, very interconnected world. We live in an interdependent world. What happens in one country definitely impacts on the other. It can create social concepts. It can create economic ideas. It can lead to major movements because we are seamlessly connected on a 24/7 basis. The other day, I was being interviewed by the Economic Society of the Jindal Global University, and we were talking of artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. I said, this is great, great technologies. But remember, everything is being recorded there in the outer space. All of us have virtual profiles. Besides our physical profile today, we also have virtual and digital entities at a personal level, at a community, national, and an international level. Now, as we live in this interconnected, interdependent world, I frankly, if I were to restart my academic career, I would want to be informed about all these nuances, which have been shared so learnedly by all the diplomats who've spoken, how their practical experiences can be woven into our conversation with our students, something which I also try and do. I do quote the theoretical citations from textbooks, etc. Not only that, I try and, in fact, pick up material from the public domain, latest articles, give the citation. But, it's always nice to put some cherry on the cake with your personal experiences, and there have been so many. And let me say that this kind of meshing of practical expertise, practitioner scholars with the academic stream is something which is, not being practiced in too many countries, too many universities. I think probably it's the US model. Henry Kissinger, who also was teaching. I know that the vice president of Panama, after the party lost the election, she became, I think, a professor. She was given a tenure professorship at Georgetown University in the US. So the US, of course, is emulating a model where they welcome practitioners, scholar practitioners, and they try and give further richness and content to the theoretical aspects of the course. So this is an endeavor which is very exciting. As a practitioner, I find it, frankly, a very mutually rewarding experience. I've become quite a student. I have to read up on the books again, try to put my thoughts in a theoretical perspective, and I have to validate my arguments with academic authority and citations. So it's a mutually learning process. I don't think I can say with authority that I know it all, not at all. My students are very well informed, and I try and apprise them of all the nuances. So I think that in this kind of international environment which we live in, the course for example, which I'm teaching on economic diplomacy, what I have tried to project is that it is, in fact, the sum total of all initiatives, formal and informal, by not only the nation states, not only by the state actors, but also by the non-state actors, who are influencing important outcomes which can affect the economic development and prosperity of nations. And you have diplomats, former diplomats like myself. You also have NGOs, industry associations, commentators, entrepreneurs, and media, etc. They're all contributing to the process. The other, I would say, reward or incentive to be in this exciting kind of track, academic track, is sometimes as a diplomat, you have to toe the line. You have a government policy. At least I come from a system where you toe the line and you obey after you're given the opportunity. I must say, I would like to clarify, you are given the opportunity to have a dissenting opinion, but then it can be overruled by the superior authorities. And once the decision is taken, you have to project what is your country's brief. You cannot project your personal opinion. You have to listen to the government. But here in the academic world, one has not got those shackles and those, fetters. You can still take your own opinion on various international issues. And what an exciting thing is, sometimes when I'm teaching on economic diplomacy, I do refer to the complete kind of, impasse which multilateralism is facing right now. And we do need multilateralism. Look at the global order today that we are in. I mean, the UN is almost 70 plus years old, and we have this thing called the UN Security Council. The UN has been founded on equality of, all countries, 193 members, they all have equal votes. And yet there is a perpetuation of inequality in the Security Council. There is this veto thing which can stymie and absolutely halt multilateral processes. Even though we know the answers to a lot of global issues, we cannot move ahead. So as a diplomat, ex-diplomat, I have this wonderful opportunity where I can share some of my frustration and try and educate the young audiences, build up opinion. Maybe they will write, maybe they will research on these issues, and maybe, they will build up a global movement, which will ultimately have a better world order. So all these things, I think, go on while you're teaching as an ex-diplomat or as a scholar practitioner. I think that the meshing and this merger of these two streams is a wonderful idea. And I think it's a learning experience. And I would just say that whether it's an Indian student population or a global student population, there are not too many opportunities. And also the economics. The fee structure is very economical. I frankly would be very, very excited in registering for such a course. So I encourage students who are listening, you have some of the experienced scholar practitioners and very, very talented faculty. I mean, I would not hear at all, underestimate talented faculty members like Professor Chaulia, who's a celebrated writer, TV panelist, scholar, writing books, etc. I mean, these are people who are devoted and wedded to academic theory. So the combination of these two talented streams, I think, is a wonderful model. And I compliment and I encourage all young audiences to register for the course.
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, I'm sure there'll be opportunities for students to learn from you. Last but not least, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. He is the program head for MA IRSS. You are all going to be learning diplomatic practice from him first semester, starting September. We have slightly extended the deadlines for admission. So we will still take some students who may be late in submitting applications and registering. But essentially starting September, which is, we are on the doorstep of this important month for the commencement of the MA IRSS. So Ambassador Mohan Kumar, your thoughts on this whole theme that we have put together? You have a lot of diplomatic experience. You teach it also. But how is it different from, being a cog in the wheel and towing the line, as other colleagues have said, as opposed to being a professor, which, historically has meant to have a lot of freedom of thought and to have critical viewpoints and such things?
Thank you very much, Sriram. A number of points have already been made, so I'm not sure I can add anything meaningful. But let me begin by saying that this course is the first of its kind in India. So in that sense, the Jindal Global University is, I think, launching something which is pioneering in terms of collaboration with Coursera. There is no other international relations course online in India, and we are seeking an international audience. We think this is a model for the future, that it can be a game changer. And we're just beginning, and we've already got some fantastic response. And we would like to build on it. As for my course, I seek to do three things, Sriram. I'll be very brief because we can then have an opportunity to interact with 71, 75 people who are attending. It would be a shame if there is no time for interaction. I just seek to do three things. One, demystify diplomacy and demystify what diplomats do. So one of the favorite things for me is to tell them the life of an ambassador at a posting, one full day as an Indian ambassador. What do you do on a typical day as an ambassador? So they are human beings as anybody else. It's a job like any other job, frankly. And certainly protocol has been stripped away as well. So demystification of diplomats, what diplomatic missions do, that's the first. The second thing, I think, which has been already made by several of my panelists, is to build on case study. So to give a personal example, I don't think there is any other Indian diplomat who has flown an Austrian flag on an Indian embassy other than me. I'm the first and the last person to have done it. Morocco broke off diplomatic relations with India. So the diplomatic passport of India was de-recognized. So we sought refuge with the Embassy of Austria, and I became the head of the Indian interest section of the Embassy of Austria. We had number plates which were Austrian, except salary, everything else was Austrian. I mean, we couldn't get Austrian salaries as Indian diplomat, but everything else was Austrian. I think that enables students to understand what happens when there is a break in diplomatic relations. Devyani Khobragade case is another famous case of an Indian diplomat who was quickly moved from the consulate of India to the permanent mission of India. So why did we do that? What is the difference between the privileges enjoyed by a consular official and a person who's a full-fledged diplomat? I think last but not least, trying to build strategic thinking among students. This is a skill that can be acquired. Not everybody is gifted. So if you want to interpret the events in Afghanistan, and without any offense to the leading academics and people who are specialists in that sense, a practitioner will look at it very differently. He will be looking at geopolitical and geostrategic implications. For example, I would love to know how China will deal with this issue. One of the big things is going to be China's pretension to be the next superpower. So then fine, noblesse oblige, deal with Afghanistan. You can't then say that I'm not going to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. So it'll be interesting to see how China plays this game. And it's also interesting to see how the United States now, there is this perpetual tension in American diplomacy between those who want to retrench and those who want to expand. This has always been a perpetual tension. And are we seeing a situation where people who want to retrench are winning out? I'm not so sure, because what is happening is they're withdrawing from Afghanistan, but then they're already investing a lot of efforts in the Quadrilateral Security Alliance. So anyway, the short point I'm making is, can I impart strategic thinking in students through my course? So that is one of the things that we are seeking. There are two other people who are going to take the course along with me, Sriram, and you're fully aware of that. One of them is an ex-Indian naval officer who's going to talk of maritime security. The other person is Pankaj, who was earlier with the National Security Council. I think it's a fantastic team that you have put together for the first, along with Sylvia, who's going to teach international relations theory. So we've got a wonderful combination of theory and practice. And I think students should be super excited. Sriram, my boss and dean, is very fond of saying that if there was a course in the JGU, he would have taken it. And I can tell you the same thing. If you're passionate about international relations, why would you not want to do a course like this on MA IRSS? And that too online, and that too for really $6,000. I mean, you try doing some of these courses in foreign universities, it'll cost a bomb. It'll cost you an arm and a leg. So I really think from all perspectives, this is a great course. I look forward to, I'm super excited. And as for last point, Sriram, if you allow me, you asked this question about why diplomats teach and so on. There are different kinds of diplomats. And I have to say, not all diplomats will end up as good professors or good teachers, but there are diplomats who are intellectually inclined. And others, of course, go on to enjoy the consular work, the administrative work, who want to work for international organizations. So you're really moving from national bureaucracy to international bureaucracy. But if you develop a healthy loathing for bureaucracy, as I have, and you want to do something else, you're absolutely right. You feel greatly liberated as an academic because you can hold the views that you want. I think Ravi was mentioning that very eloquently. So you really can put your point of view and try to see how students can benefit from your talk. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mohan.
To respond.
Thank you, Mohan. Much appreciated. Look, audience, are you checking out the chat box? Hello from Nigeria, from Cameroon, from Sri Lanka, from Indonesia, Canada, Philippines, Hong Kong, South Korea, United Arab Emirates, Bangladesh, Somalia. I mean, Brazilian from the USA. I'm not going to read out all the countries, but look, this is the kind of global platform that the MAIRSS is generating. It's a very international, multinational cohort that's coming in. We have looked at the applications. I invite more of you to apply and spread the word. It's going to be a very diverse, totally global classroom. And just look at the type of issues and problems our panelists have raised. And that should get you thinking about how exciting this journey is going to be to doing the MAIRSS. I have a very interesting question from Michael Egarevba from the US. And this is something on the top of our minds, and I request colleagues to briefly reflect on it in 1 minute answers because we are short on time. Michael asks, are conflicts ever resolved or just managed to maybe buy time? I'm hoping to get the practitioner's view of this. what is the trade-off? I mean, how is this trade-off different from resolution of conflict? In other words, most of the problems, it's not just conflicts, right? Even all the big global problems we're talking about in international relations, security strategy, covering this whole ambit, they don't really get resolved, right? I mean, most of the time we know what is an ideal or a perfect solution, but they rarely get resolved. And what are the practitioners doing? Are they simply actually perpetuating these problems, or do they actually solve problems? And this is the question. And I'll request our colleagues to, in the same order, with the women first, as always. Karen, you want to take a shot at this? Do we solve problems, or do diplomats generally just kick the can down the road and postpone things and, let the problems fester until they become bigger and bigger?
I think we have a very good example coming from Brazil, from diplomatic service in Brazil in the late 19th century, when Brazil resolved all its border disputes through peaceful and diplomatic negotiations. So I think this is a very clear example that, yes, issues between countries can be resolved, even though we tend to have the tendency to believe that they're postponed or managed. But I think there are many examples like this one in which, yes, issues between countries can be resolved.
Yeah, well, yes, indeed, there are examples to show where diplomats have actually saved the world. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that. There have been very critical moments in world history where diplomats have saved the world from disaster or calamity. So we must give it to them where it is due. Kim, are you there? Kim, would you like to also talk about problems? I mean, small country problems, which you have represented. And have you resolved problems? Do you feel proud of things you have done in your diplomatic career for which you think, you did your best and it came out good?
Well, as Professor Karen said, diplomats do play a role in resolving issues. I think that's among the core things that you learn of within the practical aspects, that you have to negotiate on solutions. You have to try to present to the table the possible solutions to a problem. And I think we do that. And for example, when I saw Afghanistan, basically with all what was going on, and I saw British diplomats still caught in Afghanistan and so on, these people do put their lives at risk depending on the circumstances. And that is something that you don't get to see in the practical realm unless you have something like Afghanistan. But I think definitely diplomats play a role in the security of their countries. They play a role in solving problems and putting forth solutions. That's something that I had to do. Lots of policy papers on possible solutions to problems.
Yeah, indeed. And in fact, there is a wealth of practical insights that we get from these scholar practitioners. It makes it more worthwhile, the education, because I have somebody in the chat box saying, I wish each of the panelists could speak for an hour, because there's so much to learn from all of them. So I really appreciate this, comment from one of our prospective students.
He should join the course, Sriram.
Yeah, I hope he or she's already on board. If not, apply right away. Hasib, your thoughts on the importance of diplomacy in international relations, briefly, please.
I'll just speak about one conflict with respect to the Chagos Archipelago and the ICJ advisory opinion that was given in 2019. It's a point that Ambassador Tapar make. I was involved in writing the cabinet note articulating Trinidad and Tobago's position, because during that conflict, you had a lot of lobbying from the United Kingdom and Mauritius, and bureaucrats advocated the view that we should support the Chagos Archipelago, we should support Mauritius' claim for sovereignty, but when it went to the executive decision-making level, they decided to create to take a neutral stance right? So although sometimes, yes, you advocate for certain things, I think Ambassador Tapar said as well, you're constricted or you're restricted to some extent, right? So not all your submissions are accepted by government. Sometimes they have the authority, they are the representatives of the state, and but it gives you good experience, right? It gives you good practical experience into how decisions are made at the executive level of government. And it's important, you know, from a student perspective, that you understand some of these critical issues. So as it relates to conflict resolution, yes, diplomats do play an important role. Dr. Chaulia said during the different world wars and so on, diplomats played a crucial part in it all. So yes, diplomacy does have a role to play in resolution of conflicts, as well as non-state actors, right? And this is something I think Professor Karen spoke about earlier, right? So the diversity of international relations, it cannot be answered in a single question, but I understand the nature of the question.
Great, thank you, Hasib, for those insights. Let me now also request Professor Amura, our Vice Dean, to talk. There is a request from students to talk about the master's degree that we have launched. So your thoughts on this whole journey. You know, you have been involved in programmatic, you know, in designing a lot of our courses, and your thoughts on how Jindal, what is it about our education you think that's stands out? I mean, you have looked at many universities around the world in your long career. So what would you say is the Jindal USP or the uniqueness when we teach international relations?
Well, actually, these, I mean, this course in particular, and the course that we will be launching, diplomacy and foreign, you know, relations and other foreign policy, are really, they do come in a timely, because the world now needs such, you know, practice in reality. And I also believe that this should be incentive to students who really wanted to know what is happening in this world and what is likely the world, where is the world heading to, what we should be preparing the new generations. For JSIA, and you know, it was really a great honor for me to learn, I should admit, more and more practice from the academic and practitioner, you know, effect through the past 6 years. For example, I can tell some what I have been. I was teaching energy politics and water politics in the Middle East. Now, I was involved personally in this Arab gas pipeline negotiations from Egypt, IRSS, to Jordan, to Syria, to Turkey, and then to Lebanon, from A to Z. But I know what has happened. You know, something which is not being in books, as a matter of fact. Now it has been done, and still it has been put to a halt. But everything is laid down. Now it is the time for you making it come again. And we have heard what the Americans, the Jordanians, and so on have opted now to relaunch and re-establish this gas from Egypt to Jordan to Lebanon through Syria. But what about the sanctions against Syria? This I can say, the honest diplomacy at that time professed what is this region needed. And that was this line. Now it is the time for this gas pipeline to be put to supply Jordan with gas and Lebanon with gas, and also through Syria. And now this is economic. The water and also the electricity grid from Jordan to Syria to Turkey and to Lebanon. Now it is the time. Now, those old diplomats who prepared the grounds, they have far-sighted vision, what is the future is in need. Now, at these things, this is what we are trying to teach in practice, which is not in books, at JSIA for our students.
Right, sir.
Concerning. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, what we go beyond the bookish learning, of course, there are going to be readings for students, but I think the insights you're gaining from the video lectures and the tutorials and the live sessions, I think that's quite a package in terms of learning. I don't think you can ask for better value for money or simply better value for time. The time that our students are going to be investing in studying for this master's degree. Let me ask Ambassador Thapar also. We have extended the deadline, Ambassador Thapar. There's a few more days students can apply and get in, even though the classes are beginning September 1st. So your message for prospective students and how they should go about, I mean, online learning is catching up and it's the in thing now, and we're doing something very innovative. So your thoughts on this, Ambassador Thapar?
Yeah, and I'll just start by saying about the question on resolving of conflicts. I think all diplomats work very intensively and do their homework very well. We are all being evaluated by our respective headquarters and our seniors. We all mean serious business, but sometimes we just cannot help the way the interests of various participating countries fan out. We have no control over those nuances. I don't think that it can be said diplomats are just managing. I mean, I remember when I was ambassador to Lebanon and we had the Syrian vice minister here. And there was a stage when it was in all likelihood, there could have been possible attacks by America or by UK. David Cameron was in power at that time in 2013 on Syria. And because there was conflict, there was this thing about the ISIS, the Islamic State and all that. It was happening, and President Obama, I think at the last moment, halted the proceedings, and I was allowed to transfer from Lebanon to my next position in New Zealand. I was being held back because the government said that they want a senior diplomat in the region to protect Indian interests. So we do try and, I think, address these issues all the time. Let us reassure the student audience that we're not in this business just for theoretical reporting and giving big reports to our headquarters. No, not at all. I think today diplomacy is unfolding on a 24/7 basis on the social media. We have very critical youngsters and experts who are evaluating diplomatic nuances all the time on a 24/7 basis. I mean, the social media, perhaps sometimes people may be more clued up about concepts where I am posted than myself. I mean, this is the reality. So diplomats have to do their homework very well, and they have to be realistic. I don't think they can go off the line. Now, about the message to the young people, it would be repetition, but I would say that it is very, very useful today, indeed, to equip oneself with a multilateral, global, international perspective. We live, as I said, in a very, very connected world. If we want to be a good entrepreneur, we want to be a good journalist, we want to represent a multinational corporation, we will have to defend the interests of our constituents. We could be government officials, we could be lawyers. We have to sometimes explain to foreign audiences and foreign stakeholders about the brief, about the interests which we represent, because otherwise there will be this avalanche of public domain information, which is always trying to eclipse or overwhelm the thinking which you might have. So you have to explain all this, and you have to interact on Twitter, you have to interact on Facebook, social media. Public diplomacy is another aspect which is very, very important. We have a whole team now which has to engage with audiences, not just in the governments and officialdom, but also in the private sector, explaining all these concepts. So, yes, sorry.
Thank you. So yeah, so the expansion of the domain of diplomacy, and all of us in a way are now citizen diplomats, so to say. It seems like citizen journalists. So yes, and with new forms of media, very much so. We are going to be discussing a lot of these once the degree program starts. So I would like to bring in Ambassador Mohan Kumar for the last word, and then my colleague Devika would like to say something about the program. Mohan, we've heard a lot of practitioners today, and some of our students may be aspiring to become diplomats. I know you train people to become diplomats in India. So your message to those who are aspiring to work either for their own countries or for the UN, like people like Karen have done it, your thoughts on how they can go about it, how they could leverage a degree like this, MA IRSS, to plan their futures.
Well, I think you make a good point. If you're planning to do a career in diplomacy, there is nothing like a good degree like an MA IRSS to kind of launch you. Having said that, different countries have different systems of recruitment. India has a very peculiar sort of recruitment, if I may say so, because we don't believe or we don't insist that candidates must have knowledge of a foreign language or knowledge of international relations, etc. But Karen probably knows this, but Brazil is exactly the opposite. They look at a very limited pool where you have to be extremely qualified in foreign languages, Latin, French, and so on. So I think different countries will have different systems of recruitment. I think the MA IRSS can help if you're taking political science and international relations as a subject in the civil service exam in India. As far as joining the UN is concerned, again, if Karen will forgive me, I'm not a huge fan of UN recruitment because it has deteriorated into some kind of, a preferential basis. If you belong to the smallest country, you have a better chance. If you're an Indian, you virtually have zero possibility of getting it, frankly. It's become like that. I hope I can be corrected. But then, so I think what I would really like to say is that the MA IRSS is for people who are passionate about international relations. You can then become a career diplomat. That is one option, but then you can become a journalist. You can head a think tank. You can join a think tank. You can join international regional organizations are the other thing. I mean, there was some talk of resolution of conflicts. I think one of the reasons why conflicts are not resolved is because of a lack of consensus in the P5. The Security Council P5 has become a joke, with China, Russia not even participating in yesterday's resolution on Afghanistan. China and Russia have abstained. Doesn't make any sense to me. We are now president of the council for this month. Today is the last day. And this is a boilerplate language resolution talking of motherhood and apple pie. And you've got two big powers which are not able to subscribe to it. They have abstained. So what kind of problem solving can you expect from the UN?
Very much so, Mohan. The primacy of geopolitics over collective security is indeed a major issue. It's a big cleavage that continues to drive world disorder, if you like. But major powers, have their own calculations. So very much subject of study. We're going to be learning all that. So I think our students are going to end up smarter, obviously much better qualified by the end of this. And Devika, Professor Devika Mishra, my colleague, is the student success coordinator. Your message, Devika, you wanted to announce something for students. Please go ahead. You last but not the least word.
Oh, absolutely, never the least. Thank you so much to all my colleagues and for your super exciting discussion. I think we're very happy with the conversation that we've been reading on chat. I would just like to firstly welcome all our registered students who have joined us for the first event that we are hosting for you as a cohort. I would also like to encourage everybody who has been raising questions, please write to us at online@jgu.edu.in. And all of our aspiring diplomats, the many questions that I've tried to answer on, are there any books on this? Please know that the very first course that goes live tomorrow is Professor Kumar's course on diplomatic practice. And this is, I think Professor Chawla has been hosting, and I've been sitting very quietly as, two core academics in a panel of scholar practitioners. Please know that these conversations are happening amongst us in the way we've designed the course. And We've curated everything in this degree with a lot of passion and a lot of intensity. So feel free to write to us, take advantage of the fact that we've extended the deadline yet again, and always super glad to answer all your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Devika. So the deadline, the new deadline is 5th September?
Yes, for the applications, yes.
For 5th September. So even though classes begin 1st September, we have extended by a few days. And in case someone is applying even beyond 5th September, we would be keen to look at the applicant depending on, I mean, we don't want the students to be left behind.
We would just, I think, Professor Cholia, we would recommend that, you try and get your applications in sooner than later, just because there's already a very active community on Slack, which is the tech platform we are using with Coursera. I know that many of our registered applicants and I have been chatting on Slack while this webinar was going on. So don't miss out on the time to actually get to know the people that you're studying. Okay, that's half the joy of doing a degree like this. And join quickly, finish your admission procedure soon, and take advantage of the fact that this extension has been built into the course again. So yes.
Thank you, Devika. Thank you for all the hard work, and thank you to all my colleagues, our distinguished scholar practitioners. I think this video is worth multiple watches because there's so many special insights that we have all gathered from people who have experience of working for their respective governments or intergovernmental organizations. And you're going to be learning from many of them in the months and semesters to come. So let's enjoy this. I mean, at the end of the day, online masters should be something that's adding value to your careers and to your aspirations, but also something that you can really, can uplift your spirits, give you new ideas, new thoughts, and take you to that, the ultimate destination, which we all talk about, critical thinking about the way the world is, and raising questions about why something is unfair or unjust or is not right, and coming up with that simplest of things, which of course is hardest to implement solutions. So thank you, folks. Thank you all, and take care, and happy studies. We are just about to launch the IRSS, and this is the time for all of you to enroll and shine, and to become equipped with the kind of knowledge and skills that you need to navigate this world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Meetings. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.